Grigori Rasputin. He came to be known as the Mad Monk. He believed that through sin he could reach out to the divine. With his hands he could heal the sick, his eyes could seduce the most modest of young women. He infiltrated Russian aristocracy and recruited cult-like followers. Some say he was the gunpowder that sparked a revolution. From his humble beginnings to his violent end, this is his fascinating true story. No one ever had high expectations for Grigori, a peasant in the small Siberian village of Pokrovskoye. Rasputin was the town drunkard, and when he wasn't getting drunk and fighting in the local taverns, he was off, stealing horses from his neighbors' barns, or evading the local authorities. Although Rasputin was illiterate and could not read nor write, he possessed a magnetic energy and exuded charisma, but some believed him to be a con man. After one of his latest skirmishes with the village police, his wife had had enough and kicked him out. Rasputin always felt his little village was stifling and wanted to escape. Their feelings were mutual, and Grigori left. With no money and unsure where to go or what to do, Rasputin sought refuge in a monastery in a neighboring town. He felt a strong brotherly fellowship with the monks at the monastery. Much of them had a similar upbringing to Grigori. In Russia at that time, if you were born into a peasant family, you were destined to till the earth and plough fields for meagre wages. It was a harsh, cold and unforgiving environment. Compared to peasant labour, the monastery didn't seem bad at all. He did labour and farming, but it was nothing like the indentured servitude he was used to. He felt community and belonging amongst his brothers of the cloth. But he was not just there for a warm bed and a hot meal. Rasputin always pondered the great questions of life. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? The more he prayed with the monks, the better he felt about himself. Grigori heard of an island off the Greek coast, the island of Mount Athos, where Orthodox priests go to connect with the divine. After much deliberation with his fellow monks, Rasputin began his pilgrimage south to Mount Athos. The journey would be long and hard, but Grigori had God on his side. Something happened to him on his long, isolated walks. He felt more and more connected to God. Of course, the journey was hard and unforgiving. But to a Russian Siberian peasant, there wasn't much that fazed the young monk. Grigori reached Mount Athos, but now he preferred to tend the garden than pray with the monks. But something wasn't right. Now the monasteries felt like a prison to him. Rasputin knew now that God was not in the temple walls, but rather a force of nature he had to experience. Rasputin began the long, arduous journey home. He missed Mother Russia and his brothers at his old monastery. One night, camping in the wilderness, he heard the unfamiliar noise of laughter and music. He came upon a camp of men and women dancing around a fire. Rasputin felt waves of excitement and joy. He danced with beautiful women and bonded with the young men. It was such a contrast to the monastic life of the Orthodox Church. After years of celibacy, he gave in to temptation. But something profound happened. Instead of guilt and shame, he felt even more connected to God. This was not just a party in the woods he stumbled upon. They were a group of spiritualists known as the Kalists. They believed that to connect with God, they must rejoice in nature's splendor. Instead of denying the flesh, they believed God wanted them to connect with him through ecstasy and pleasure. Russian Orthodox communities persecuted them for their sexual immorality and their hedonistic behaviors. Rasputin had his own battles between the church and wrestling with his human desire. Grigori met with their mystic priests. They were said to have taught him how to heal with energy. It was a type of hypnotism and the ability to fascinate people with his gaze. Grigori learned everything he could from their sect. It deeply resonated with his own beliefs, but Rasputin still longed to return home. Upon arriving home, his brothers hardly recognized the young pilgrim who left them. He returned almost as if he were a saint. He seemed to pull the air out of the room. He now had an aura surrounding him. His presence was magnetic. Villagers from all over traveled to be healed by him. He would heal by laying his hands on the person and making magnetic passes over the patient's body. Young women particularly took a liking to the tall, handsome healer. Quickly, the townspeople's curiosity started to spread throughout Russia. His stories created intrigue. Word of Rasputin spread all the way to Moscow. This was a time of a spiritual revolution. Seances and clairvoyance were in high demand. Everyone wanted to meet this mystical healer. Rasputin had now become too famous for his little rural province. He was urged to go to Moscow and meet with people in high society. In Moscow, Rasputin became a huge sensation. At every dinner party or social club, there was talk of the monk with supernatural abilities. Women chattered of his sexual prowess, and a group of women called the Crows invited him to tea. They were a group of elite socialite women. Grigori was far different than the high society men they were used to. He amused them greatly with his crude manners and his drunken scenes. Rasputin had now become infamous in Moscow. He could not escape the public eye. He eventually gained the attention of the Russian royal family. Their young son had become ill with haemophilia, a rare blood condition. Desperate to help their son, they reached out to Rasputin for help. Rasputin rushed to their aid. He believed that this was part of God's plan for him. Rasputin met with the boy and performed a healing. He seemingly made an instant recovery. The young couple fell in love with Rasputin. They too were captivated by his presence and his energy. Rasputin was now a part of the royal family. He lived in the royal palace and dined with them every night. He gained a tremendous influence on their decision-making. The young couple believed he was clairvoyant and could see the future. The rest of the nobility were highly suspicious of him. They started calling him the Mad Monk. They spread rumors that he was a vile man. They said his powers were of the devil and he used demons to assist in his healing. They despised Grigori Rasputin. The men devised a plan. They had decided that Rasputin had to go. He had gotten too powerful too quickly. They could not afford to have him gaining control of the royal family. The men befriended Rasputin and invited him to a party at one of their estates. One man lured him into a basement. They offered him food and wine and told him they would send a woman down to entertain him. But they had poisoned the food and wine. Rasputin, being none the wiser, ate and drank until he was full. But it had no effect on him. He waited patiently for someone to join him. Finally, one of the men came downstairs, expecting to find him dead on the floor. But to his astonishment, he saw Rasputin at the table drinking wine. The man, full of fear, drew his pistol and shot a bullet into Rasputin, hoping this would kill him, but Rasputin lunged at the man. He shot again and Rasputin was killed. The men grabbed his body and drug it out of the basement and through the halls of their estate. They dumped his body off of a bridge. A few days later, his body was discovered, revealing the horrors of the men's crime. Now all of Moscow knew the name Grigori Rasputin. When the royal family heard the news, they were devastated. Investigations were underway. The people of Russia had lost hope in their leadership and politicians. Soon a revolution was ignited. There were people who loved Rasputin while others hated him. But they didn't think he deserved to be murdered. Rasputin became a legend among the Russian people, the peasant who became a priest, the priest who became a mystic, and rose to the top of the aristocracy. Rasputin represents the struggle in us all. A deep longing to be accepted and loved, the struggle between pleasure and pain, temptation and abstinence, a desire to experience the world fully. In the end, Rasputin may have not been a great holy man or a divine healer, but his power was in his ability to connect with people. This is the fascinating true story of Grigori Rasputin. Was he a drunk, a womanizer, a healer, or a holy man? Perhaps he was all these things. Grigori Rasputin, the Mad Monk?